I've talked about humility in a few of my previous videos, including how to get over an inferiority complex, as well as the irony of arrogance. But in this video, we're going to focus more on the how. What are some things you can do, some actions and thoughts that you can carry out in order to maintain a sense of pride in your accomplishments while still staying down to earth and not having an endless perception of yourself and still being able to respect others? So to start off, don't brag. Don't try to draw people's attention to whatever it is you're proud of, thinking that it's going to make them think highly of you. Whether that's being outward about it, or even if you try to be subtle about it by dropping hints in a conversation, or humble bragging, as they say, on social media by posting something whenever you say, get a new job or buy a house or get married or something. Either way, it's not going to work out for you because people are not that easy to manipulate. They'll see through that, and instead of looking at it the way that you want them to, which is, okay, now you're a really cool, great person, instead, you're just going to end up insulting their intelligence because you're presuming that they can't pick up on the fact that that's what you're trying to do, when in reality they can. They know that that's what you're trying to, that's the effect you're trying to achieve. And you're also kind of implying that they're inferior to you, because in order for somebody to be impressed by something, that almost implies that they themselves don't have those same accomplishments. And you're setting the expectations very high so that when the time comes for you to perform, then there's a much higher propensity that you're just going to end up falling short of those standards and disappointing people. So instead, it's much better as an alternative to just be silent about your accomplishments and let people figure them out for themselves, because if they care, then they'll do their own research and they will figure it out for themselves. And at the same time, they're also going to respect you more because they'll note that you didn't feel like you had to talk about it and bring it to their attention. And also, if they don't care, then they're not going to do that research and they're just not going to care, but there's nothing you can do to change that. So you're better off just not trying. Now, with bragging comes sort of this inherent assumption that not only are you very good at what you do, but you're pretty much the best that ever existed. And instead, the next part of this, the next thing you got to do is succeed and respect the fact that there will always be somebody out there that's better than you, whether you like it or not. And if you're not able to admit that, then you're just going to come across as jealous and a bad sport. So in my case, as an example, again, I know that I'm fairly competent when it comes to playing guitar, but I'm nowhere near the best that ever existed. And I'm always happy to meet somebody that's better than me and even learn a thing or two from them. And speaking of talents like playing the guitar or being really good at basketball or having other skills, abilities, knowledge, what have you, all these things don't say that much about your character, because what is playing guitar at the end of the day? It's just plucking strings on a piece of wood. What is basketball? It's just having really proficient muscle memory with handling a basketball. It's nothing that nobody else could do with the same amount of practice and dedication. And at the same time, other people could have other talents and skills that you yourself don't have. So you might be very good at playing basketball, but then somebody else who can't do that might be really well versed with the stock market and be able to invest money and make a lot of it, which is something that you yourself can't do. And if you do know something that somebody else doesn't know, or if you're capable of doing something that somebody else isn't capable of doing, then share your knowledge. Don't be afraid to teach others, instead of thinking that withholding information is going to help you maintain a sense of superiority, because sooner or later, people will learn those things that they don't already know in the same way that you came to know them. And once they do learn them, you're not only not going to be able to take credit for mentoring them and helping them along the way, but they're also not going to respect you, and they might say something like, well, you're not so tough now, right? Because now we're both on the same playing field. Now you might be thinking that, hey, you know what? It actually wasn't that easy for me to get to where I'm at, and it took a lot of hard work, and I deserve some credit for that. And I would agree, but what you're alluding to is that how you got to where you're at matters just as much as you getting there in the first place. And you can't forget that you also could very well have had some help along the way, or you could have just gotten lucky at times. And so you can't take complete credit for doing something if somebody else or something else was partially responsible for helping you get there. So in my case, for example, I am proud of what few things I've accomplished in my life, but none of those things would have been possible if I hadn't been lucky enough to be born into a family that cared for me, provided for me, and supported me along the way. So I always remember that while I can take some of the credit, I certainly can't take all of it. Next item on the list is don't mock and belittle others, especially if they embarrass themselves or make a mistake in front of you, such as by tripping over themselves or forgetting the speech halfway through, because tomorrow that could just as easily be you. And you can't claim special treatment if you just did that to somebody else. And we've all embarrassed ourselves at some point in our lives. I mean, every last one of us was born a screaming naked baby. So don't add insult to injury. Instead, the next time that happens, look the other way, be respectful, don't hold it against them, and don't think that you're immune to that same thing happening to you. Now, much in the same way that that could also be you, you could also be wrong. And that's the next piece of this, is to maintain that in whatever assertions you're trying to make or opinions that you hold, you could be wrong. It's very difficult to be 100% correct in anything, but if you try to claim that, then not only are you being arrogant, but you're also being very closed-minded. So always be willing to have a respectful conversation with somebody who disagrees with you and hear them out and listen to them, because you might even learn something new that way. Whereas if you just assume you know everything and you're just always right, then you never will learn anything new. And the last thing we're going to talk about here is quite simply to be polite. Just show good manners and be generally courteous to people. And I think a lot of people are afraid of doing that because they think it'll make them look weak. So they overcompensate by being rude, by not holding the door open for people, not apologizing, using profane language out in the open. But as a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. If you show good manners, then you're showing that you're confident enough to do that, and that if there are any consequences, if somebody does perceive you as weak or otherwise try to take advantage of you, then you're courageous enough to deal with that if that happens. So to wrap up, humility is reflected in both your actions and your thoughts. So be modest, don't brag, and respect others regardless of how they stack up against you in terms of whatever standard of comparison you're using, knowing that there's always a little bit more to the story than that. So it's okay to be proud of your accomplishments. You just have to balance it out with just enough humility so that you're not on the other extreme end of the scale where you're just being arrogant and egotistical. So hope you guys liked the video. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.